Last one, and probably one of my favorite 2-bus compressors in the box, which will probably surprise many. Not colored, not a special emulation of anything. Still one of the most common questions I get. What are your favorite 2-bus plugins compressors? In this video, a quick rundown on my top 10 favorite 2-bus plugin compressors. Some old, some new stuff. Let's get to it. Hello everyone, welcome back to MixBest TV. Hope you're having a great day. Before we start, check the info box down below for my mixing courses on Pro Mix Academy, free plugins, special offers and discounts, and of course links to all the plugins that we are seeing today, my top 10 favorite 2-bus plugin compressors. And if you want to support the channel, but most important, if you really want to learn how to mix and master professionally, click the join button down here, become a MixBest TV member and access the exclusive members only content. An already big and always growing library of full mixing courses, start to finish, mastering courses, special videos, and a lot more. You also get mix consultations with me via Skype or email. Let's get to the video. All right, this is gonna be a quick rundown of my favorites. I'm not gonna spend too much time on each or like showing each and every feature for each compressor. Just gonna tell you why I like them, what are the styles, the genres, and the common scenarios for which I would pick one instead of the other. In random order, we start with the first one, which is the Softube Zener limiter. Now, this is a vintage style compressor. It's very colored and it's not very versatile, not because of its color, which is pretty amazing on pretty much everything. I actually use it in THD mode very often as a color box without compression, but because of its behavior. Even though we have a sidechain filter here, sometimes it's a little too bouncy and the action is a little too heavy-handed, even low settings and a low gain reduction. But it's nonetheless a great 2-bus compressor if you start mixing with it, as you should with any 2-bus compressor really. And it's particularly good to add some grit, some vintage vibe to material. For example, on a piece like this, like electronic music. So without first, Alright, so it adds a little bit of character, it adds a little bit of density, you can hear it, and also you can hear it that even with these very conservative settings, as soon as you push it a little too much, you kind of hear the bouncing of this one. So you can also use this one, you can open 2 instances and use the THD mode as a first instance just for saturation and a second instance for a little bit of compression. This is how it sounds when you put it in THD, only 1 instance. So without first, THD mode. Okay, a little bit of character, and after something like this you can add the second instance just for the compression. The Comp 2 is a little more bouncy than Comp 1, so for 2-bus purposes I will lean to Comp 1 because you can hear. I'm gonna bypass the THD one and just have you listen to Comp 2. Okay, Comp 1 is a little more mellow behavior-wise than Comp 2. Next one, you know the SSL type is 9 times out of 10 my go-to 2-bus compressor when I work with hardware, okay? I had several right now. The latest incarnation of it would be the West Audio NG mastering compressor that is here. Because of that, I always had hard time finding an SSL G comp style plugin with which I was actually happy. And there are so many out there, and this is totally a personal preference for me, maybe because I've been using it for a long time, maybe because it's a sound that I'm used to. The Waves SSL G comp, it's still my first choice if I don't have hardware and I have to go SSL style on the 2-bus, okay? Yes, it narrows the stereo image a little bit. You compensate while mixing. Yes, it doesn't have an HPF filter, but also the old SSL compressor on the console didn't have one. So keeping these limitations in mind, this is a compressor that, to me, it gives me that grit and that glue factor of the SSL. Unfortunately, you have to work your way around some things that they're just not the same as having a hardware. With that said, it's still my favorite, okay? One thing that you can try with this plugin, if you don't like the stereo image that it gives you, is to run it in dual mono, okay? Sometimes works a lot better, sometimes you lose a little bit of mid-channel. Usually a good starting point for me for any SSL type compressor is attack between 10 and 30. Very rarely I go faster, and release fairly fast, either 0.1 or 0.3. Now, on the hardware, I have many more choices for attack and release, but if we stay with the classic SSL, these would be my starting point settings, at least. Alright, as you can see, I'm not really using makeup gain because with 2-bus compressors it's way too easy. I usually don't use makeup gain on 2-bus compressor unless I have a hardware unit and I want to push the output for color, but you hear the effect of this compressor. And actually, by not using makeup gain, it's kind of easier to hear the effect of what would you expect from an SSL style compressor. So this kind of, it compacts the material. And even if it's slightly lower in level, despite that, you should like the compressed version better if that's the right plugin for the track. Because of this, it kind of sits the track back a little bit. Next one, a really great overall compressor. This is not just for 2-bus, it can be used in mastering, and it's also a great vocal compressor. But when you want something transparent and very precise and super cheap, that's actually a free version of it, which I think is the one I'm running right now. There's also a gentleman edition, like all the plugins from Tokyo Dome Lab, Kotelnikov. This comp is absolutely great when you want something transparent, when you want simply dynamic control with the least imprint, sonic imprint on your mix. It has some very unique features that helps you tailor this one to any track.
Photo, she bought a bit of money on the back end. She be screaming, daddy, put me back in. I ain't got no time, this is Mackin. Girl, player, acting. Now you wanna see about the bird flow? You don't really know that I know. I ain't got no time for the game or the lame. I'ma get it one dime. Photo, click. Pause, what you really wanna talk about? Pause, how you wanna go and run my life? If you got the dollar to gon' get. If you really wanna see me, you know that they gon' hip. If you really got it poppin', they gon' get. I ain't wanna talk, I don't know walk. I just wanna try. I did 5,000. She just wanna talk about the dick, I'm wildin'. I don't wanna fuck about the bitch, I'm gone. No, better yet, get a little bit of this to get the check. Gotta have that when the nigga just break a neck. If you really know, then you better just write the check. Be easy, damn boy, it's easy. He know them sleazy, them niggas is all a medium. He in it, gotta create the mix and then double down on the rhythm. Like damn nigga, you.
You hear there's no sonic imprint, there's no distortion, there's no artifact, there's just dynamic control, which in this case I'm trying to use this as a finished mix, actually a mastered track, to bring some density, some low-level detail, okay? The cool and unique features of this one is you have two releases, a release peak and a release RMS, and you use the pre-crest knob to decide which one comes into play. If you look at me moving the pre-crest, you will see we can use only the release peak or only the release RMS with everything in between.
Photo, she bought a bit of money on the back end. She be screaming, daddy, put me back in. I ain't got no time, this is Mackin. Girl, player, acting. Now you wanna see about the bird flow? You don't really know that I know. I ain't got no time for the game or the lame. I'ma get it one dime. Photo, click. Pause, what you really wanna talk?
You also have a Softonie and the stereo sensitivity fully variable from 100%, so stereo link to 100% to 0%, so dual mono and everything in between. Low frequency relax, so you have a high pass filter on the detector, and you can also change the slope.
Photo. She bought a bit of money on the back end. She be screaming, daddy, put me back in. I ain't got no time, this is mackin'. Girl, player, acting. Now you wanna see about the bird flow?
I really like this one because it doesn't muffle the top end. Okay, so you can actually do a pretty ridiculous amount of gain reduction on vocals, especially without hearing the usual clarity and high-end loss that you hear with most compressors. Let's get to the next one really quick. API 2500 old school, still one of my favorites, just because the 2500 tone and behavior is such a classic, very much like an SSL. Great for metal, great for any modern music, including EDM. I have two plugins actually that I really like. The Waves version 2500 and also the American Classic from Softube. So it's a full API console emulation, including the drive and the drive character. And I think it's the only one that you can get without console one. So this is a great 2500 version, but for this test, I'll use the 2500 from Waves. Even though it's not really like the hardware, I had the hardware for many years. It's still an amazing workhorse compressor. And again, great also as a vocal compressor. The keys to the 2500, if you're not familiar, usually the go-to settings for two-bus are feedback, so old type, METH and the thrust detector, so you boost a little bit of mid and top and you release in the detector some of the low end. I keep the makeup manual, and the stereo link could be anything. We have fully variable from 100% to independent, okay? I'll start with 50%, which is usually where I start with this compressor. Okay, with the 2500 you have the mid-range tone, that snappy drum, and for modern music, like I did in this case, you want to try the loud thrust, so to take the most low end out of the detector, because it tends to react a lot to it. It's different from the hardware, so pay attention to it. And also be conservative with the gain reduction. I personally never go over 1 to 2 dB on the two bus with this type of compression. Let's get to the next one. Pulsar MU limiter compressor. We've seen this before. We actually reviewed this compressor. It's one of the few Vari MU compressor in plugin world, and I actually like it. This is kind of a clean version of the Vari MU tube type compressor. I say clean compared to another one that we have in this list that we'll see later. So key with this compressor, even though Vari MU compressors on single tracks like vocals on bass are capable of doing a lot of gain reduction with no artifacts. That's why the Vari MU topology is so great. On the two bus, usually MU compressors and in mastering as well, they are used more like a very gentle, soft touch to glue things together, okay? On the hardware, like for example, the Vari MU, sometimes you just run the input really hot and compensate for the output and barely touch the needle. Now, plugins are not exactly the same as hardware, so there is that effect here. It's just a lot more subtle. And this one has so many controls in the sidechain and option for mid-side, parallel compressor built in that is a lot more versatile than many hardware units. But the concept stay the same. Very little gain reduction just to smooth things out. Okay, you hear with this one, there's a little bit of softening at the top end and the mid-range, which could be good for like harsh material and something like that. With VaryMu, I prefer to use them on the slow side. They are usually slow, but some modern version of VaryMu compressor can be fast. I still feel like they're not fast enough to be used as fast compressor, but that's just me. Actually, I said driving the input is kind of subtle. Well, not really. You can hear the distortion driving the input. In this case, you can hear the saturation. So I didn't really remember this compressor that well until now. So he actually has that action. Now, the distortion that he adds and the saturation, if pushed, is not where the hardware is. I would stay very, very conservative with that. There are other saturators, in my opinion, that you can use on the tubas to add and to combine with this one. If you push it, you can hear it kind of blur things, and the hardware doesn't do that. Okay, I rather run it on the clean side with the input and work with the threshold to get the amount of gain reduction that I need on the track. Next one. This is a new entry. I never officially showed you this plugin. This is from Matthew Lane, the maker of the famous Dr. MS. It's called TICO, stands for tightness and contour. So the tightness is the dynamic section and the contour is the equalizer section. Basically, they model a bunch of different compressors with their most common, most used settings. So you don't have to set the attack and release and stuff like that. This is a very, very versatile, quick result type of plugin in general. For tubas, I find the hydrogen, this one is the most appropriate. Again, mostly for its action is on the slow side, but it gives you that glue factor that you want on the tubas.
Sound like, what real sound like, I'm still the same down guy, same down vibes, I know that you heard this, I deserve this, after what the hurt did, it done turn out perfect, I'm just tryna sound like, what real sound like, I'm still the same down guy, same down vibes, I know that you heard this, I deserve this, after what the hurt did, it done turn out perfect, I told you I'd
When you try this on a track and you're not sure what to listen for because it's unconventional, you don't have attack, you don't have release, listen to how he releases the material, okay? Because it's on the slow side, you can see it from the VU meter. It's very easy on slow ballads or slow songs like this to hear the release and how it brings up the material. You will know immediately if that's appropriate for the track or not. There's also nitrogen, which could be used for tubas. You can try the two.
sound like, what real sound like, I'm still the same down guy, same down vibes, I know that you heard this, I deserve this, after what the hurt did, it done turn out perfect, I'm just tryna sound like, what real sound like, I'm still the same down guy, same down vibes, I know that you heard it.
Okay, which is a lot more colored, and then if you want to mess around, you have all these EQ, again, different EQ modeled and different settings, which is useful. Check it out. Next one is the PSP Old-Timer Multiband. Now, I'm not a big fan of multiband compressors for the tubas. That doesn't mean that they don't have their place on some songs. This one I like in particular because it's a really good emulation of a tube compressor in general, and you have the functionality of a multiband. You have independent attack and release for each band, you have an HPF, and here you have the valve color, which sounds really good. PSP always did very nice saturation, if you remember the PSP vintage warmer, okay? And you can take the valve completely off. Let's try it really quick.
It's all over creation. That's why money sing about the moderation. On behalf of all the people down there, so when you suffer, one way ball out to all the living get tougher. Them judgment word them me utter. Talk it loud, me no stutter. Every morning, big guys wake up to bread and butter. And no give a damn about the people in the
All right, it's a really nice color, and you can dry the valve as much as you want. One cool thing is also that you have width control for each bend. So you want to widen one of the section. Again, pay attention to do these things on the 2-bus or on a finished mix especially, but they are there for a reason. If you know what you're doing, they are great tools. You have mid-side mode, you have actually a mix blend, but I really like the color of it. Even just running, you know, half a dB of compression, and you can see the settings. These are not rules, but in general you want to be on the slower side for the low end, because the low end causes more artifacts and more distortion on every compressor. And then you can be faster. You don't have to, but you can with the high range and the mid range. We all know and love the Korg MJ. You see, I was probably the first one showing this plugin years ago. It's still one of the best analog type plugins that we can have in the box. Personally use this more on vocals, females vocals especially, and bass, but it can actually be a great 2-bus plugin even if you use it without compression at all and just run the color of it. There's this little panel down here, everybody probably knows, between the dark and hi-fi and the drive, clean and driven. This can be a really nice color box for 2-bus. That doesn't mean that the compression, the action of the compression is not useful. The MK1 has a specific character that I sometimes really like on 2-bus. Let's try it really quick.
Sick of the way you speak through your teeth. Sick of the way I don't want to eat. Sick of the way I give it all back. Scream so loud, my voice starts to crack. Sick of the way you speak through your teeth. Sick of the way I don't want to eat. Sick of the way I give it all back. Scream so loud, my voice starts to cry. Sick of the way you speak through your teeth. Sick of the way I don't want to eat. Sick of the way I give it all back. Scream so loud, my voice starts to cry. Sick of the way you speak through your teeth. Sick of the way I don't want to eat. Sick of the way I give it all back. Scream so loud, my voice starts to crack.
Okay, definitely vintage vibe. If you go to MK2, you have more control over the behavior of the compressor. You hear, just moving the timbre from dark to hi-fi, you can literally change the vibe of a mix.
Sick of the way you speak through your teeth. Sick of the way I don't want to eat. Sick of the way I give it all back. Scream so loud, my voice starts to crack. Sick of the way you speak through your teeth. Sick of the way I don't want to eat. Sick of the way I give it all back. Scream so loud, my voice starts to crack. They got you say something. I gotta say something. Get out. I can't breathe. Get out. I can't sleep. Your love is
Okay, definitely colored, and just like the Zener, pay attention to the action, because even a little can be very audible, but this is a cool choice for when you want to add some vintage vibe. One of the newest plugins that I got, this is the Diode 609. I actually have a hardware, the HA609 here on the desk. This is an emulation of the famous Neve 33609. While for the most part, this compressor was used on drums or overheads, many people use it successfully on 2-bus and or on subgroups, okay? It has a very specific color because it emulates a diode bridge compressor, so it's very creamy and it's very thick. Now the plugin, of course, is different from the hardware. It's a little thinner, but it's still a great compressor because the action is pretty accurate, and also it does have a nice grit to it, like this specific one, okay? If you're not familiar with the 609, it has 2 stages, compression and limiting. Now on 2-bus, very rarely you're gonna use the limiting. While it's very good, for example, on vocals. It can be very good on rock vocals, for example, even just the limiter alone. So for now, I'm just gonna use the compressor.
Sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out. So I gotta make it. It's do or die now, and my soul is sainted. Should've been out by now, running out used to be homies, some changed up, hard working, now to say, look, just caked up. I made up my mind, I gotta get the bag. Shorty, I am not the one, so don't you get attached. And where I am from, it's like we never had. So if I got
Okay, godsend to have the high pass filter on this one, because otherwise it would react to the low end a little too much, especially on a track like this. On this specific version, I like it because on the advanced tab you have an input drive to add distortion and color to it.
sunshine on this side of town, you could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out, so I gotta make it. It's do or die now, and my soul is tainted. Should've been out by now, running.
Usually on the 2-bus you see this one used conservatively, slow attack, release on the fast side, and actually I was running 2-to-1, but usually you want to be even more conservative because, again, being a vintage style compressor, you can hear the action is not necessarily what you want every time. Last one, and probably one of my favorite 2-bus compressors in the box, which will probably surprise many, but I mentioned this before in various courses. And it's the good old linear phase multi-band compressor. And I kid you not, the times that I was forced to work completely in the box, granted that I had other things on the 2-bus, saturators and other things, and EQ and some other stuff, this was 6 to 7 times out of 10 my 2-bus compressor. So not colored, not a special emulation of anything, but this comp, even though it's old, and gods know if we could use a GUI update on this one, is still for me one of the best 2-bus plugin compressors. And specifically I have a starting point preset that I made for myself over the years, which is basically a variation of the preset that comes with the plugin, the multi-electro mastering. And why I like it so much? Well, because simply it has this ability of, I repeat this word a lot in this video, but in this case is the most appropriate for this compressor, glue things together. And even just starting with this preset and lowering the general master, you can hear it.
Yo, them are some big pretenders, so me take away myself from them. Take away myself from them. Ulterior agenda, so me take away myself from them. Take away myself from them. Bad vibes sender, me take away myself from them. Take away myself from them. Man, I go like we no member, but them devious ways that me defi condemn. Well, me no care if a friend or so-called brothers, me find out say them know how we climb up the ladder. Flip out with them again, me nah go bother. Link up with clean-hearted strangers on me radar. In a me territory, me nah make them chat ya.
Now, what you will not hear here is color, is character, in anything like that. But if you have an unbalanced mix, which this is not, so unfortunately I can't really show you, I don't have any unbalanced mix really here, but if you start with this preset and you lower the general master, this comp will tell you what frequencies are a little bit off, and even just as an analyzing tool will tell you what to adjust in the mix. With that said, once you set correctly the attack and release for each band, it will take care of those problems very well, and we actually gel your mix together. So this is a little trick that I give away right there, but let's try this mix for example.
Man, I got a lot of these nerds asking how he that sick shit is in English like his third language. Bastards, worms, maggots, what I'ma call these rappers? Can't use the word faggot, cause they all hype on life. Bro, I'm a cross between DMX and Sean Price. I'm kinda godlike, the final boss type. Y'all silly trying to kill me, I already spawned twice. Y'all some bottom feeders, theater clowns. It's robbing season, I'ma beat them, fucking kneel them down. Make them cop a plea for freedom, leave them bleeding out. I'm Carlito, mob leader, Don Vito, Nino Brown.
Okay, you can hear a little more here, but still, if you have an unbalanced mix, probably laying down, not finished, just try it to understand how it works, and go from there. You'll learn the tool, and this plugin will surprise you, even again if it's old. I think it's still one of the best 2-bus compressor for EDB mixing. This is it for this video. I hope it was useful. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please don't forget to leave a like. Follow MixBest TV on all the other platforms. Right now we are collecting the questions for the Q&A. Also drop some suggestions for a video that you want to know. I'll try to get it done. Click the join button down here, become a member, access to the exclusive material. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time.
Hands on my neck, hands grip my throat. Lift me up.